Alright guys, so let's start with the tools and materials that we're going to need to make our cake for today. So let's start with the hardware parts first. So in making this gravity-defying cake, I chose to use materials that you can easily find in the hardware store and won't entail a lot of drilling or a lot of work. So first, I'm going to show you a couple of choices for your base. So I actually just have scrap wood, or this bigger one you can find in craft stores. Here in America, we have this available at Michael's. It's about 12 by 12. Probably close to half an inch in diameter. It's about a quarter of an inch, almost half an inch. And then for common wood, which is what we can find in the hardware store, it's a little shy of an inch. So this is 3/4 in diameter, 3/4, and this is about less than half. Scrap wood, common wood, you can find here in 12 inches, 24, 10 feet. So you could just have the hardware cut it, or you can cut it yourself at the hardware. So no particular size required for the cake that we're making. I'm just using the smaller one because it's a small cake. So I'm going to put the bigger one aside. This one that we're going to use, approximately 10 inches by 5.5 inches. And then we're going to use a 4x4 piece of wood as well. In the US, these are found in Michael's. You can also find them in different sizes. So for the particular project, because it's a small cake, it will just need to fit our base. So same thickness that we're going to use. So 4x4 inches. Right, because that's just the size that I want for my cake. When you make something like this, you can scale the size of the wood, and you're going to see why. And then simple, easy, and small pieces of hardware will be L brackets. You can choose a bigger one if you want. This is just a 1 by 1 inch. It will do the job, and it's what I have at the moment without having to go out during quarantine. So 1 by 1 inch, and then corner braces about 1.5 inches. Again, when you see me use it, you will realize that you can actually change the size as well. So as long as it's gonna fit and hide in our structure, you'll be fine. So corner braces, about 1.5 inches. You're also going to need pieces of cake board, your glue gun, your drill, and to make things a lot easier, we're going to use self-drilling screws today. So the difference between a regular screw and a self-drilling screw would be the end parts. You see that? So there's like small ends of drill bits in the ends of your self-drilling screws. This means that you don't need to put a pilot hole into the wood, and it will just drill itself. So that's going to make it a lot easier for us. And then we also need a couple of templates for our cake. So if this is going to be our cake, we want to be able to see that the size of our cake, we want to see it from this angle, right? So we're going to have to see it like that. So it will guide us with Oh, the cake's actually supposed to be like this. That. And like this. So we need to be able to guide the cake later on and use just cake board or whatever to whatever sturdy shape to guide our cake. Right, so let's put these aside and we're going to begin. One thing that you can use as a guide would be just drawing a template on your board. So if you can imagine, the cake will be like this, right? For the base, it will be like this. Let's see if I can make you come closer so you can see. There. So what we're doing is marking where we want our cake to go. And then the next part of our structure will go here. Right, so let's do this part first and secure it. And I'm going to use a little bit of glue just to help. This is not really going to be the determining factor whether it's going to stick or not. Okay, but just to help it stay in position. And then we're going to use the braces or the brackets on each side. Now there's also another way to do this, but that will entail drilling. So if you would prefer, let's say, to drill it one way, let's just say that you want it to be invisible, right? And you wanted to drill a hole, then you would drill 2 holes through 2 pieces of wood, which takes so much time and effort. So instead of having to do that and then having to screw it that way, a lot of people might just think, you know, that's too much work. And if there's a way that we can hide the structure anyway, which is what we're gonna do, I might as well just use something that's a lot easier to find. Okay. One thing I want you to remember when you're using a self-drilling screw is that you don't want it to keep on going, right, as you're pushing down on your drill. So you have to be, if you do, it's going, if you keep on going, you're going to loosen that grip of the threads on the wood, and then, you know, you defeat the purpose of what you're doing. All right. So just to be on the paranoid side, that's what we're gonna do. Right, so you can see now that the shape is coming along. Right, with this, when you look at structure and aesthetics, you know, issues, the only thing that we need to worry about later on is covering the screws. But structure-wise, we want it to be sound first and foremost. Right, you want your structure to hold the cake that you're making. Next, we're just going to use the glue again to help hold it in position. So I'm using my template that I drew earlier. It would have been easier if I just screwed it before I did this, but it's fine. So we're still going to use 4 screws. I'm going to drill the bottom one first. Also know, you know, the size of your self-drilling screw should not exceed the size of the width of the wood, so that it's not going to poke out on the other side. Perfect. So in this scenario, we're just using small pieces of cake. And we want to make sure that it will hold. Right, so I'm trying to find something that's heavy. So let's pretend that the cake is here, and then there's something on top. So what I do when I make these structures is I put something on top just to test whether my structure will be able to hold what I want it to hold. So imagine a cake that's just a 4x4 inch cake, but when we're done, the 4-inch cake will look like it is floating right next to another cake. So that's why I wanted to do the shadow figure using our template, so you can see what we're trying to do. Right? So the next thing we're going to do is to cover the surfaces that cake is going to touch. Okay? So figure-wise, we know what it's going to look like. Next, we got to determine the cake board that's going to go on this side, because the cake will be on both the bottom and the sides. And then for the top, cake will just be here, right? Well, I guess technically we're going to do that so that it's cleaner. No, Wait, I'm just seeing that the cake needs to be okay, yeah. I'm going to do it this way. There. And then for this one, 4 inches plus, we're adding 4 inches plus 3, so 7 inches. Four inches plus 3. Right, so I'm going to cut my cake board and I'm going to come back. Right, now we're going to cover our structure, but before we do, there's a couple of things that we need to prepare. So remember earlier when I said that you have the option of either putting screws here or putting screws through here just to hide any of these things, because a lot of people are just not comfortable having to drill that way. This was the more beginner option, just screwing things in. However, this poses as potential issues because now we have to hide them too. So we're going to spend a little time just making sure that the screws are not going to protrude. And to solve that, I'm using a very thin layer of foam core. So in the US, we have 2 different sizes for this, which is a 1/4 inch and an approximate 1/2 inch thick. So this is the 1/4 inch, or what we call thinner foam core. Right, so I cut out the same shape as our frame, and we're going to put one at the back and one at the front, and we're going to estimate that location of the bracket. So this one is going to go to the back. But just so that you can see, what we're going to do is we're going to hollow it out. Kind of like that. We're going to hollow that out. And the foam core that we would usually find would have a coating on each side. So you can hollow it out. I'm just going to show you right now. You're going to hollow it out from one side and still keep the other side intact. So just make sure that when you cut, you're not cutting all the way through, and you're just making space. So we're just going to take this out. Kind of like dig it out almost. So use any tool that you got. Right, so this is what it's going to look like. We're just taking the one side out. We're taking all that foam with us, and it's not ridiculously hard. It's just a little more time consuming. But I wanted to take this extra step so that we don't have to worry about the screws later on. Things coming out. And it doesn't have to be perfect or precise. The bottom line is that we just need some space so that the things that are bulging out will be flat later on. We're gonna put it on there and see. Okay, there's space. So the objective, hollow it out. And then you're also going to notice at the back of it, so even if you can see that it's hollowed out here, the back is clear. So when we put the fondant in there later, we're not going to have any issues. It just helps. Okay, then we're going to glue it. Same thing for the front. So now it's a little neater to look at. No bumps or anything like that. And then on the side where the cake is going to go, remember we still have a couple of screws or bumps to worry about. So we measured 4 by 3. So this is cake board. So I'm making a mark where the screws are at. Approximate. So there's also some people that don't like to do this. I mean, I don't like to do this too. But we gotta take that extra step. So we're gonna attempt to do the same thing but using cake board. So this may not be as thick as your foam core, but when you try to do it this way, even if there's a bump that appears later on, even if it's not flat, there's still, it's cake. It's not, you can hide it inside cake and at the same time preserving the food safe side, which is what's important in what we're doing because it's cake board. It does not have to be perfectly straight. We're trying to hide it, yes, but we're more importantly wanting to have a food safe surface. And it's easy to kind of pull out the corrugated boards. You know, it's not going to be perfect, but it will help. All right, so I'm seeing like there's a little bit of a bump, but that's not going to be a huge problem. Okay, so we're going to glue that all in position. So at this point, in the grand scheme of things, we want cake to be standing on food safe material, which is cake board. Cake will have a side and the bottom made out of food safe cake board. Your cake will not go on your board, will not go on the wood on the other side, but this is going to be our little stand that will look like two things are floating like that. All right, so I'm going to come back. I'm going to prepare the cake and the ganache, and we will be on our way. Alright, so now that we have prepped our structure, I'm going to put a little piece of press and seal. I was thinking cling wrap, but no. Press and seal will be able to stick and stay in position better than cling wrap. The only reason I'm doing this is because I did not prep my baseboard beforehand. So I don't want my cake to be touching my wood. It's just me. I mean, if you prepped your wood in the beginning, you wouldn't have to do this. Or if you're really, really careful, you don't have to do this either. So I just want to minimize the mess. Okay, so press and seal will just be able to stay in that position. Alright. Right, so we're going to use Ganache, and the usual ratio that I use is 2.5:1. 2.5 chocolate, 1 cream for semi-sweet chocolate. So looking at our structure, we know that we're going to need a square and part of a square. So the bottom will be smaller than the top. Probably gonna take a little bit off of that too, but right, so we'll put some ganache on the side as well as the bottom. And this will act as your glue. Nice place to use cake scrap. So when I do cakes, in general, I just like to use my cakes straight from the fridge because they're a lot easier to handle. So I know that there's that overhang. Don't worry about that space, we're gonna fill that up. So does this cake need mud cake? No, because you can use any cake for this particular structure because your structure doesn't really need to hold that much weight. Your cake will not be carved, so what you essentially are doing is just putting your cake on top of a very creative stand, if you will, but that's all. So you can put a spongier version of cake. It's just that this is just my default for a lot of my cakes is I use mud cake. And these are my spare ones from my class cakes. Oops, got stuck. One sec. So you have to count the bottom. You have to count this when you're, at least for the one I'm making. I'm just saying, I'm counting this because I'm trying to make a cake that would look like they're two squares, right? So one is a gift box and the other is a slice of cake. So it should, for the design that we have in mind, it should have that silhouette. So we want to count this. If you wanted to make it taller, it's also up to you. Actually, that's fine. It's not. You can even add another one, which kind of tells me why the heck not, right? I'm looking at it right now. I think it's okay, because it doesn't have to be perfectly square. We're gonna put a slice of cake at the top. Maybe I'll just leave it there, because I have an extra slice. Maybe. Just because when you make the cake slice later on, it doesn't really matter whether it's even taller. The stand will be able to take it. But yeah, maybe I'll go with that. I'm just changing my mind right now and making the top cake a little taller than the bottom cake, because it's gonna look a little more interesting in terms of what your cake silhouette looks like. It looks like the floating cake is more substantial in size than your bottom one, which is totally fine, right? So little gaps we're going to fill with ganache. Again, it was just my personal preference in the beginning when I was designing this in my head to do two squares, and then now we're just changing our minds mid tutorial because I had an extra slice, so which is fine. Nobody would know, just us. Right, so like this one, for example, I'm trying to fill in a gap because later the space where our cake meets with our gift box needs to be straight. So we want to be able to fill this, because all these will be part, this one will be part of your cake. This meaning the white cover. So I'm trying to fill in that gap. With ganache. And if you cannot fill it in, let's say your first pass or your first go, then put it in the fridge or freezer so that your first coat will set, and that will be a good base for a second coat. Right, not very concerned about the edges at this point, but I want to look at the gaps that I need to fill and concentrate on that. And remember too that the cake came out of the fridge, right? So it's chilled. It will set, hopefully, as I'm working with it. So that poses two things, a good and a bad, right? The good is that it may set as we're working with it. The bad is that if you're taking a lot of time filling gaps and whatnot, then the cake might already set and you're not ready yet. So what we're trying to do right now is to bridge this gap, because I didn't have that much cake here at the bottom. Alright, first coat. As long as we are filling the gaps. Okay, one potential question that I can anticipate is, what if we want a different shape for the top? Totally fine, right? Totally fine. So when you make this yourself, I want you to kind of picture where the joints are going to be at. Be creative in how you put them together, and then test the weight. So right now we got a tall slice of cake. So this all of these will be cake. And again, we changed the design mid tutorial because we had a little bit of extra cake for the top. And you know, when you think about it, when you're making a gravity-defying structure, it is more intriguing when it is more top heavy, I guess. And you make your audience kind of think that the bottom one is handling all that weight together. Alright, so for the first coat, I'm never worried about what it looks like. As long as you get gaps covered, seal in your crumbs, then you can put that, you can stick that in the fridge for a little bit. And then we'll come back with a second coat. What you need to avoid when you're doing your first coat, it's kind of looking good now. A little bit. Just not perfect. Now, it's very far from perfect at this point. But you can see how that silhouette is forming, right? So I like this idea. It's not the first time I think that we're seeing cakes in this silhouette. Yes. What I like about doing a smaller scale version of an illusion cake like this is that we're using materials that are easily found. We're using brackets, we're using wood plaques, we're using wood scrap, screws. We're not using welded materials. We don't need anything extremely custom, you know. So it tells me that if I can find these materials, you can find them too, right? So horrible. But I'm going to stick this in the fridge for a little bit, prepare more ganache, and then I'll be back for the second coat. Right, so that took us a few minutes. Seriously, like 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. But to get that cake chilled, it should be enough to enable us to fix any gaps that we have there, because we want that to be straight. You're gonna see that if your first coat has set, then the next one will just sit on it. It will be easy to manipulate. So let's leave the edges. Those are the last things to worry about. And of course, depending on your design, actually you don't have to make the top too straight edge. If you're, it's just that you're making this, you're in a hurry, and the top design is cake, right? A slice of cake. Then it doesn't have to be extremely OC straight, you know? It's cake, so you can make it look like a slice of cake, and you can have uneven ends if you want to. But we're going to try as much as we can to get it neat. So even something as horrible as that, you can use Ganache to fix it. See those bigger gaps? Your Ganache will be able to cover that one. Alright, so good first pass. And then we're going to go back and look at edges. So when you're working with cakes with edges, the edges are usually the last thing to fix, because everything that's around it needs to firm up first. So if we obsess over the edges from the beginning, then we would be spending so much time just trying to fix it, but it's still soft. So what we're trying to do is solidify pretty much, or have the other sides set before we even worry about having a strong straight edge. Okay, so I'm going back again, just trying to see where the gaps are, what we missed. And I can also sense from every time I put a little bit of ganache in there that my cake is going to set very soon. right? So now I'm using a flexible acetate scraper. You can use any acetate, but it's better to find ones that have firmness to it so that you can scrape with some power, and you can control and you can manipulate that ganache that's about to set. If the scraper you have is too thin, it will be a little difficult to, or if the acetate you have is too thin, I should say, not the scraper, so it's not gonna scrape, right? You want it to be tough enough so that you can take some of the ganache with you and influence that, the direction where it goes. I'm now seeing a portion that I need to fix. I'll show you where it is. So this part I can see a slope, like a big slope. So I need to fix that. Like it's not even. But again, the objective is not to create a box, right? So, grand scheme of things, it's not going to be make or break. If you were making another box, then that would matter, I guess. If you wanted to make like two perfect squares, then go ahead and obsess over that. But today, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm just trying to see, I'm trying to cover as much space it needs to be fixed. Alright, I'm gonna stick this in the fridge as I prepare the fondant, but So far so good. And just to show you real quick, like at the bottom of it, it's clear, there's no screws hanging out. So that's the reason why we took the extra time to kind of hide the screws from this end, so you can see that silhouette from your end. When we're done later, the box will be up to here, and it would look like the cake is floating in midair with about ½ an inch attached to the box. Right, so I'll be back. Let me clean up for a little bit, and I'll show you the covering of this cake. So now that we are back and we've refrigerated our cake and we want to get it ready for fondant. So for this particular cake, I'm going to keep the design really simple and straightforward. We did spend a lot of time with the construction of the cake and ganaching, so we're going to keep the design straightforward, which is still in line with the theme, which is a birthday party. So we're going to put a slice of cake on top and a gift box at the bottom. Now when you make this cake, it doesn't have to stay in this theme. You can use whatever design you have in mind. Right now, what I'm doing right now is I'm shortening on the sides to kind of soften the edges and also go through some imperfections, because the heat of my hands would help smooth them out. So like I said, when I was ganaching this cake, the top doesn't have to be super perfect. It's supposed to be a slice of cake. You can be a little more forgiving there. The bottom, we're gonna make it into a gift box. So what I'm gonna do first is to cover the sides with one color and then cover the lid with a different color. So the colors I'm going to use today would be blue, pale pink, white, and gold. And these are satin ice. I'm also going to use vinyl sheets, and I always use these for my cakes because it helps me transfer my fondant neatly into my cake. So we're going to start with the base of the gift box that goes onto the sides, and we just need about 4 inches by 12, 4 by 12, kind of, because it's 4, 4, 4, and then a different panel for the bottom. I mean for the side. When you're rolling out something that's long, it's better to roll it into a sausage shape first, kind of guide it, then rolling it out from a big lump, because that's going to take much longer. Oops, my vinyl sheet is sliding. Also remember that the shortening that we used on the cake will help our fondant stick, so there's no need to put water or anything like that. Alright, so also notice that I rolled out more than I should. And this extra is to prepare for that little piece on the side. Okay. Just trying to align the line so that it's easier for me to cut. It also helps if you have one of these self-healing mats. It gives you an idea on where you are when it comes to size, length. Four inches or so, a little over 4 inches. So, or even if you don't have 4 inches, remember the top's going to be a lid anyway. So, then I'm going to cut out my extra for the inside part, which is this part, and that part I could always just use shortening. To cover that. So that part is about 3 inches. Alright, so we use that part first. We cover that so that the excess is easy to just cut off and take off. And then the sides we're going to cover with our panel. So let's double check if we have enough. Looks like we are, oh, that's fine. Not terribly off. Okay. So also notice that when you're working with vinyl sheets, every time you pull away the vinyl, it will stretch by a tiny bit. So be a little careful that you're not pulling too hard. On the good side though, when this happens, if you're also short, if you're using it for a paneling method, right? If you're short, then it kind of gives you some extra inch or so. I'm stretching the bottom because it kind of missed that. I want it to be flush. because it's better to have all of that covered now than worry about it later. That one came out nicer, that other side. So also check if you have bubbles that formed, because every time we put a panel around something, there's a big potential for the bubbles to form. So right now I want to align it to the edge. I'm going to put that aside again. This side's a lot neater. Actually, that side. There. Right, then for the cover, we're just going to need a four-inch, and then there's an extra inch on the side. You can use a smaller, so this is why I ask you also to get vinyl sheets in yards or in meters, because when you need them, you're just going to cut the size that you need. And it's relatively inexpensive. Right, so my daughter's pretty noisy outside. Alright, so remember that we have a template. I'm going to check right still around that size, but I want to I'm gonna give an allowance to the edge. I'm gonna cut the edge. Wait, to make it a lot easier. I'm just trying to cheat right now and make it easier because of the time constraint that we have. When we have a tutorial for an hour and I'm pushing myself to give you a whole cake in an hour using real cake, it's pretty challenging. Let me say that. It's pretty challenging. So I'm going to try to simplify it as much as I can. So I'm putting an extra inch on the side. So we're going to, I know that I'm going to cut, but I'm not very sure where. right? So I'm going to get my cake, get scissors, and then we're going to lay the cover. So what this is going to look like is that there's the gift box and the cake are kind of touching on this corner, and I just want to be sure that the sides are not too far from each other. So again, carefully you take it off. So if there's any like imperfection like that, for example, I'm not gonna be too worried about it, like that one, because later when you put the cake slice on it, the cake slice is a very forgiving, always a very forgiving design, because you can put whatever you want on it. Okay, so I'm just gonna pinch the sides and then cut. Pinch it and then cut. Not the neatest of things, and you can use a scraper or a smoother. To finish the edges. But then again, I'm looking at the time and we don't have that much time, so I'm going to drop this for now and then move on to the next one. So the only thing that's missing from the bottom would be a ribbon, and that I can make in the end. So now we're moving to the cake part. I'm just trying to see overall where we are. All right. All right, now that we're going to cover the top, in the interest of time, I rolled out the fondant off cam and trying to time myself to hopefully do it all the time that we have allotted. All right, so we're going to start with the side, which, did I have enough for it? Yeah. So I get a lot of questions when it comes to fondant, just because wherever you are, whatever brand that's there, it will not always, there's no universal behavior of a specific type of fondant. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're still going to put some icing details on it, so don't worry so much. It's not, I'm talking to myself, don't worry so much if it's not coming out as neat as what you initially wanted it to be. We're trying. All right, so the side will be 5 inches long. So I'm gonna try to make one side as, wait a second, I think I have an extra overhang I want to take out, so I don't have to trim once it's up there. I think I cut in an extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had an extra inch up there, miscalculated. And if there's any excess, just put the excess at the bottom, okay? Meaning if there's any excess, let it fall down, because I'd rather have the neat top. It's easier to cut the bottom. See, a little bit of give, meaning a little stretch. Almost. There's a little bit. In here, there's a tiny bit of overhang, and then we're going to fix that too. Oops, now I gotta pull it because it needs to be exact with my gift box. Right. Right, so if there's any things that are hanging out from it, I'm not too afraid to just take a blade and then slice the bottom. All right, the next thing will be the drip, the icing, and the ribbon. Magic. All right, so I've already rolled out the white fondant, and I've used my ruler to make 1-inch strips. On my cake, I've made in lines on where I want my my icing lines to go. So let me move this a little closer. So these are the little details that we're gonna time for. All right. So for these to help us, we're gonna add a little bit of edible glue. So again, it's up to you if you want to do a drippy kind of icing, which I think is more appropriate. Time constraint wise, this is faster. If we did the drippy icing right now, one of the things that would concern me would be sometimes when you do the drip, it has more weight than a flat strip. Wait, I just realized it's not even on that side. Than a flat strip, which means you gotta fix it and kind of try to adhere it better. If that makes sense. Where am I? I'm going to just adjust it by a little bit. Getting bothered by things not being in line, but hey, we're trying here. All right, next would be our lines on our ribbon. So we know that it's gonna go in the middle, right? So for this strip, I'm going to use shortening. So again, when you do this yourself, you have far more freedom to add the nice details like patterns, whatever detail you want to add to your ribbon. But right now, time constraint. So we try our best with the time that we have. And then don't forget the bottom. So we're still going to add that little strip down here. So it's going to look like there's a ribbon from that end. Gosh, that really bothers me, this one. So can't see it clearly. Okay, now we're gonna put our bow on it. And for the bow, we're going to just use 2 rectangles. We're going to use 2 rectangles, and we are going to scrunch it up, just like a scrunched up ribbon. Right, size-wise, approximately 3 inches. So it doesn't have to be exact, guys, because we're going to scrunch it up anyway, but to give you an idea, about 3 by 6, and then we're still going to trim. So it doesn't need to be perfect. 3 by 6. So what I want to do with my ribbon is I always gather it at the bottom so that try to gather it at the bottom and then pinch. You can put a ball of cling wrap inside just to help with the shape if it's not holding up at the moment. There. And then another one. We scrunch it up at the base. Gather at the base. I think the more not too calculated we do, the more scrunched up it's gonna look like, which is what I personally prefer. Right, or try, where is my cling wrap? Here you go. Here it is. Ah, it's too soft right now. Alright. So we're gonna use cling wrap to kind of shape it up. And then just use strips fondant strip, kind of gather the middle. Right, and then I'll be back with the drip. Right, home stretch. What I'm going to do now is make a swirl, not a swirl, a drip for the top. So I'm just using my template earlier as a guide, and we're making waves and this is against our template in the middle, so we kind of have an idea. So it's gonna look like a splat. We gotta move fast because I don't want the ends to I don't want the ends to dry. So I'm putting a little bit of shortening. I know the top has been lying like that for 30 minutes and it's gonna start to harden on us. So nicer coverage for my splat. And then I'm gonna try to stretch that out. And when you have splat patterns like this for your panel, the first thing I'm really concerned about is how it looks. So we want to smoothen the edges so it will look like when you cut the cake, the icing slowly dripped out. This is so funny because this is not going to happen on a fondant cake. All right, which is what the cake is, right? All right, doesn't have to have edges, so I'm trying to smooth that part so it doesn't look so harsh. And then real quick, I'm gonna try to add some more detail, but with a time constraint again. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see as much of the tutorial that I did, because I know I went over 1 hour. I won't Paul get mad. Well, he doesn't get mad, by the way. He's such a great guy. All right, so we're just gonna do a little swirl and a cherry on top, just for a little breaking of the. I'm gonna break the plainness of the color. Again, I'm hoping that when you guys make this on your own, we're going to have far more, you know, variety and more exciting things to put. but staying with the classic birthday themed ideas. You can put a candle, you can put a cherry on top, put sprinkles later on. Can't see it from your side. That would be good. And then to kind of clean the bottom, this is what I want to do at the bottom, is to just, now I'm going to add a swirl at the bottom. I mean, not a swirl. I keep saying swirl. A border, but not too complicated, but just to kind of bring it together. All right, so I rolled out a piece of fondant. I'm using my fingers, as you can see, to break that piece into little node looking like drips, but actually these are this is going to be our icing drip for our border. So the objective is to kind of break that monotony of color and bring down the color that's on the top, and also cover the edge that's appearing on, okay, got cut, the edge that's appearing on the bottom of this cake. So we just want to make sure that it is floating, yes, but it doesn't look raw and unfinished while it's floating. So this kind of brings that, your eyes down a bit, and kind of puts them together. All right. Okay, so far I'm gonna try to add a little more detail. And then for those who have questions, the bottom was just covered with a vinyl sticker. So would have been easier to, if that was done at the beginning, but here you go. This is our little gravity-defying birthday cake. All right, guys, thank you, and I hope you liked it. Bye.